All right, welcome back, everybody. I am so excited to have my dear friend Jarret Stanley here with me on the podcast today. Jarret, welcome. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm good. I'm good. Joe, thanks for having me on the show. I've been a fan since day one with you guys in Social Coach. I always take a little bit of time to scope out and see what people are doing. I'm always very interested in what people are building. So you guys are building some awesome stuff. And we've been friends for a little bit too. So
Yeah.
finally able to catch up on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So you actually just recently made a big change yourself. So why don't you tell everybody what you're doing, what big change you just made?
Yeah, I mean, this is the mortgage industry, right? So the only constant is change, and that's no exception to people and personnel. So for me, I've made a big change going to Nationwide Mortgage Bankers as their chief marketing officer. So I first and foremost, everywhere that I've worked has been an amazing place, and they've all had their own values and contributions to help me in my career. I've been in mortgages for, oh my gosh, almost 2 decades now, so quite a while. And I've learned a lot in many different places. I think Nationwide Mortgage Bankers is a really special place. They are run and operated by two very specific people. Rich and Jody are awesome folks. I have really great relationships with them. They're great mentors of mine. Rob Jane, of course, is an amazing sales leader. I think there's a lot to be excited about if you're working in mortgages, but especially if you're a part of an organization like NMB, where they are really tech, data, and results-driven folks. So for people who are looking to be, on the edge of that and really reap the benefits of things moving forward, I think it's a great spot to be. So happy to be building my career with NMB.
Yeah, that's a really special company. I had the opportunity to catch up with Jody at Mortgage Collaborative conference a couple months ago, and I've kind of watched her over the past bunch of years, and we've connected at all these different conferences and stuff. And she's just one of those really special individuals that you can just tell is like super dynamic, really gets it, and is such a phenomenal leader. So I'm sure it's just like really exciting to get to be there on that team and have such a big impact. I mean, watching you in your career, you've had an impact at some really amazing companies along the way. And it's always interesting, having been in this industry about the same amount of time as you, it's very cyclical, right? And it's right now we're in a really interesting time. So just like changing companies, the industry is changing all the time. And really the past year has been extremely interesting and difficult for a lot of companies. So I'm curious, like from this podcast is all about it's by marketers for marketers, right? So when we talk about being a leader in a marketing division of a mortgage company, how have you like personally navigated some of these this rate fluctuation and a lot of the cutbacks and things like that as like a leader of the marketing team?
It's a great question. I think mortgages have a way of making you feel like you're on top of the world, and then the next day humbling you pretty extremely. You quickly realize that a lot of things are circumstantial, and you then have to kind of consolidate your focus onto things that you can control. One of the things that I tell my folks is control what you can control. You can't control what Jerome Powell is going to say at the next Fed meeting, but you can control how you react. You can control the messaging that you use to leverage new business and to grow your sales team, right? Like these things aren't necessarily correlated to what somebody in the federal government's going to say or do the next day, nor are they correlated to whatever war is happening overseas or whoever's in power here and there. You're in control of your own life, and you're in control of the things that you know and the things that you can build, right? So we're by choice in mortgage, so that comes with great pros and it comes with great cons sometimes. And right now, we've been in a tough time where seemingly it's you can't buy a mortgage lately, almost kind of like in the NBA. You can't buy a bucket, you can't just get lucky. This is one of those times where we were on extreme highs, now you're on extreme lows. And I think the people that are going to come out of this really well are the people who, there's a saying in investing: when in doubt, zoom out. Right?
Yeah.
If you see the economy as it's gone in various boom and bust cycles, this is not, if you've been in the game, this is not new. No. It's just it doesn't hurt, it doesn't make you feel better in the short-term pain, but it gives you a bit of perspective about the way that the USA has pretty much just risen to the occasion almost every single time, and has been pretty resilient in its economy, right? So the whole goal is to invest in the micro when it's tough. That way, in the macro, when you're riding the trajectory, you're going to come out on top than people who were overzealous in the good times and who were over fearful in the bad times. There's a lot of people right now who are over fearful right now because they just are afraid to act. And that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like you want people to push forward in tough times. If you can push forward and persevere and be smart about your decisions, you're going to be much better when the roller coaster goes the other direction.
No, I mean, that's totally valid. And I think, what I see kind of, you mentioned like zooming out and working with hundreds of different companies and seeing how they all work and operate. It's really fascinating to me to see like the companies that, in the last, before May or June of last year, when there was so much business, everyone's mind was focused on, all right, how do we grow faster? How do we manage this mess of loans coming in? But how do we make the most of this, of the good time? And it's like, all right, we're going to focus on, most companies were like, all right, how do I scour my client base to make sure everyone refinances with me versus someone else? And then the rates go up really high. And then everyone's like, okay, wow, well, I can't talk about refinances anymore because rates have increased a lot. There's certain circumstances for it, but I'm seeing a lot of companies right now pull back significantly on marketing and marketing spend and marketing people. I mean, the amount of marketers in our space that have lost their jobs is quite frightening, to be honest with you. So it's the companies that I see that are investing in marketing and sales right now to help, grow their way out of this bottomless pit that we're in right now are the ones that are going to be successful. The ones that are thinking, all right, well, I got to cut and I got to just, preserve what I have. Those are the ones that you're seeing are getting acquired or, going out of business right now. And so, what kind of advice? I mean, I know you've sat in a lot of these boardrooms, during this time and past ones as well. I mean, how do you counteract that as a marketing leader? Because I think that's probably what a lot of people are interested in is like, how do I, as a marketer, go to my management and say, this is necessary for our time to grow our way out of this, while they're saying, I don't have any money to spend on marketing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the mentality when people say they don't have money to spend on marketing is because inherently, I think of a lot of it is us not looking in the mirror as marketers and having a prove it mentality.
Yeah.
A lot of times like in good times, it's easy to throw money out windows, right? Like you saw people spending money on ridiculous things over the past few years. So when you just say, I need to hire personnel because my team is quote busy and we need help and people are burned out, like, yeah, these are very non-quantifiable things to say to a business owner who is now forced to make very difficult decisions based on margin spread that is quantifiable on the ops side. So
Mhm.
you got to come respectfully, you got to come with a better argument than that.
That's right.
So because if you can't, you're going to get cut or your team's going to get cut. And that's just is what it is, right? Like if you can't articulate your value, it's very difficult to say, well, our graphic design looks great. Our brand looks great. We're doing a lot on social media. Like
What does that
these
mean?
things, yeah, what does it mean? Like for people who aren't in the space, that stuff means very little. So you have to find ways of translating this as an actual part of a business strategy. And that comes from really having data to point back to your LOS or lead sources that you can point attribution to or cost spend relative to the ads to exposure that you're getting. I mean, you have to become almost more scientific method than artist for the most part. And that's hard. Like I come from a graphic design background. So for me, all I cared about for a long time was how great it looked. I never really, until I got into management, I never really looked at, did this thing that I love deploying actually help someone get a loan or build awareness to some top of funnel? It wasn't that much of a concern to me. And once I started managing people and saying, oh, wow, their success in their career kind of depends on a business KPI being met by our actions, kind of shifts your perspective a bit. So for people who are in rooms like I am, where that's a conversation right now, which I think are a lot of the rooms out there, focus on how you are making a business impact, less about are you just making deliverables, because one is not more valuable than the other. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's such great advice. And I think, just to kind of tack onto that, one of the things that is really interesting is when you think about, all right, what do my leaders want to see for me to help make a good decision, right? It's on you as the leader of that marketing team or an influencer of that marketing team to bring to the table why and what you're doing and what's the impact of what you're doing and why you need what you need, right? You can't just say, I need more help, right? And I think you mentioned that, like,
Right.
oh, my team's burned out, right? I just it doesn't feel right anymore. Like, executives don't care about feelings as much as, like, and I mean, there is to an extent, right? And I think that we don't want anybody to be burnt out or have problems. But really, when it comes down to it, especially in this time when we're looking at significant margin compression and problems on the actual business as a whole, you have to do your duty and your responsibility is to dive deep into that data and bring it to the table. Here's what we have done for you. Here are the number of leads we've brought. Here's the number of eyeballs we're getting here, and broken it down into the different types of campaigns, different activities that you're doing. And as you do that, it becomes much more readily understood for the executives. And when you really, you take a even further step back, as marketers, we have to understand who our audience is, right? And your audience at that stage is the executives of your company. And many of them, if not most of them, come out of a sales background, right? So you think about it, most mortgage executives, if you look at the C-suite, really most of them come from, they started as a loan officer, they grew up to be a manager and branch man, like just kind of kept on going up. So think of how you're presenting in terms of like, how would you present this to a loan officer and keeping it very, as easily understood as possible is I think the best advice that I can give on that. But anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's knowing your audience is a theme of a mortgage marketing department, mainly because we have so many audiences, right? There's executives, internal audiences usually get pretty overlooked. And that's something that's actually very important. So that's a very true statement. And if you're able to articulate yourself internally, you'll be able to find more support and people who are your champions, instead of having to feel like every request that's external to your department it doesn't always have to be this uphill battle. You can articulate where your vision is for the future and how you're going to try to accomplish that, and where you're going to be smart about the dollars that you do spend. So yeah, I mean, having a battle strategy with there and being able to articulate it in a way that your audience can hear and resonate with is a tool that should be in every marketer's playbook.
Absolutely. So thinking back to like the past couple months, then in terms of like what have you implemented in your team or at either Nationwide or your previous organizations during some of these tough times? Like what types of like innovation have you brought to the table to like try to save money, cut costs while still looking at adding marketing value?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to seeing where there's sort of, I would say just effort waste that's around, right? Like, are there things that I could be doing, or a team member can be doing, or an AI can be doing that decreases the amount of touch points and friction to get the same outcome or a better outcome? Like, we give an example. One audience that's actually really overlooked, especially when you're talking about a retail environment, is the actual partner and builder onboarding. We never really think of onboarding as it results to our partners, but we usually attribute onboarding processes to new team members, so like new hires, or to consumers, right? So those are the two main audiences that we would consider like kind of a get to know you type process, right? But I think builders and partners are some of the most overlooked audiences as it comes to that. Most of the time, our conversations we have for them are, hey, Jarret, can you come meet my agent today in the conference room? Just explain to him in 15 minutes what we can do and see what you want to do from there. That's so haphazard. And if we are really a B2B organization cleverly disguised as a B2C organization, we really should be having more focus on how we treat our partners with care and essentially showing them through our amount of preparation and our systems that we put them through that they are a priority. I don't want it to feel like the agent has to drive across town, meet with me, and I discuss, well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Like, that can't be the conversation. So we found that we were spending a lot of time on that kind of really just blank slate consultative approach, which has its benefits, by the way. Like, it's nice to be able to sit and ask kind of a blank page question to somebody to see how their business is operating. But what that really hurts with is you don't know what the answer is going to be. They could give you a really hardcore, difficult problem to solve, and you've essentially signed you and your team, who is already at like half capacity of what it was a year ago, up to solve this individual's problem that may or may not produce business and may or may not actually work with you. So congratulations, you've signed up for the maximum work for a unknown return. So for us, we said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have a builder sign up process. We're going to have an agent sign up process. It's not going to sound like a sign up. It's going to sound like a relationship starting process. We're going to get to know you. You're going to get to know us. We're going to deliver you value right out the gate. And we're going to do it through predictable automation and templating as much as we humanly possible. So that includes signing you up for total expert connections, getting your headshot, your bio, your all the variable data points that we would need to fill in. Very similar to like how we onboard an employee. We want to onboard that partner and bake them into our systems as much as humanly possible. That way, day one, when they arrive, they get the flyers, they get the single property websites, they get the email campaigns, they get all this stuff that usually takes teams who are haphazard a few weeks to turn around. We do it in about a day or two. And then it gives us a lot of bandwidth when we come back to that conversation of, we've already provided you these 10 things. Now, what else can we help you with? You'd be surprised how those 10 things that you provide through a system actually kind of negates a lot of the subsequent requests. So we still get the great optic of looking like we're going to provide a ton of consultative support, but we've already given them so much value for nothing up in the front that usually when it comes to making that last, hey, is there anything else I can help you with request, lots of people usually don't come back with anything. They're like, you've done so much for me already. Let's plan for the next 6 months. And it's like, wow, we should have done this because then we could have done it for 5 times the amount of people for the same amount of effort and got a lot more results. So just rethink this, I guess, to boil that down to something, rethink where you are completely manual in places and how you can package that into something that is not only quicker, but more efficient and can appear proprietary, something that they can only get by using you.
That's such a, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think we could probably spend an hour talking about partner programs as well. And in fact, we probably should sometime because I think that's a really powerful tool. But what I like about that the most is that you came prepared to the meeting, and it may like the presence and value that brings to the table as a company for that partner or that referral source looks like you guys got your stuff together, right? And it's like it's stuff that you can provide to a lot of other partners. It's actually a repeatable process for you, but to them it looks like it's custom curated, that you're providing a lot of value and that you guys know what's going to actually work for them, right? And I think that's one of the bigger things too, is that most organizations and most people, whether it's your internal team, the executives, whether it's your loan officers or whether it's your partners in it, like in this case, is most people don't know what they want, and they don't know what they don't even know enough to know what to ask for your help from, right? So coming to the table like you did there with a ready to go package is such a valuable proposition to bring to the table and get started with. I love that.
Yeah, 100%. There's
super innovative.
I was going to say there's that concept of visual legitimacy, right?
Yep.
Like confidence, being able to it matters so much, not just as a marketing person in terms of like the relationships or the actual conversion that you're trying to achieve. It matters in your career, like presenting yourself in a way that looks prepared, that you've taken time, and that you're showing these people that you value their time, that they are a priority, that I've thought about you before you've arrived. I'm here for your success. And here's how I've already thought about that. Here's what we can do without you having to lift a finger. Man, this is a relationship business. How do you think that person feels now that you've shown them that? As opposed, and then juxtapose that against what they typically get. They typically get the person who's late to the meeting, who doesn't have anything to show, and asks, well, what do you want to do? That inherently says that I have put no thought behind what I'm going to do here today. And I'm hoping that you will tell me what you want in order to satisfy your opinion about me. It's way more relational than anything. You're doing a lot of this to not only, you'll get a great business result from it, but you're satisfying that real, inherent emotional need for that person to feel valued. And if you do that, you really do kill 2 birds with 1 stone with that effort.
100%. I love that. And I want to dive more into that too, actually, when in terms of like your relationship as a marketer with the loan officer, right? Because I think a lot of times what we get from LOs is they just give us a laundry list of things that they want, right? And they may or may not know why they want it. They might have read it on Facebook of a colleague, said, oh, this is the best thing I've ever done, you should totally do this. Or like or the realtor came to them and said, hey, can you get me some flyers for my open house, right? And they're like, oh, Jarret, I want you to build me a flyer. And so, talk to me about that process of the intake of a loan officer's request and how you kind of manage those, because that's also something I know that every marketer listening to this conversation has been in that same seat.
It really does come down to switching your mentality from being an order taker to being a advisor.
Yeah.
So there are people on our teams that don't have managerial roles. And a lot of the temptation with them is when they get assigned a ticket, their goal is speed and efficiency, get it out the door, stop asking questions, check off the box, get it out of Zendesk or out of Asana or wherever it's held, and you move on, right? Your goal at that point is delivery. I always challenge our people to make the end goal not necessarily delivery, but to be satisfaction and as a KPI bet for its existence. Like marketing's value is not based on its existence. It's based in, did it move the needle in terms of what you were trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
So for us, the relationship with the loan officer is one of those needles that we're trying to move forward, right? And a lot of you're never going to develop rapport with a loan officer or get to the understanding if you don't ask questions. If all you're doing is saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll have it to you tomorrow, and then you deliver it and say, hope this works well, thanks, goodbye. Yeah, your job is done. You can go home and do whatever you want to do after that, but you did not enhance your relationship with that person. And in an environment right now where literally these loan officers are having their phones blown up every single day by recruiting calls, their marketing departments are not proprietary. Your relationship with that person is, right? That is a chance for you to develop a relationship with that person that transcends that check being waved in front of them. That it's a reason why people choose to plant their flag at your organization versus wherever else is calling on them at a given time. Plus, it also helps when a lot of times, to your point, Joe, you brought up the fact that you don't really know why this is being requested. You just know there's urgency behind it.
Yes.
So if you ask that secondary question of, hey, why is this so? What? Hey, Mr. Loan Officer, why is this so important to you? Is there something that I can do to help make sure that what you're getting from me is successful?
That's right.
Then they'll go ask them with the premise of, I'm here to help you. How can I do this better to make sure what you're asking me hits its mark? Yeah. And usually that's like, oh, this brokerage is new, or somebody's trying to encroach my business, so I got to make sure I'm here for this guy. Okay, cool. Have you thought about do we have them in our system, and are they doing the right things? Can we have a consultation with them? Like bring them in for lunch, like figure out some way of getting to the point of why there's this emotional kind of episode happening with requests lots of times. And then that's when that light bulb clicks and it's, oh, this person's here to help me build my business. Now I can kind of be more open and frank with them. I usually coin it like this. It's the ATM method. You know how like with cash withdrawals or with deposits, you can't make withdrawals from an empty ATM. You have to make deposits. So for me, I treat my relationships a lot like that. I can't go and tell loan officers they're wrong for doing what they want to do. This is a dumb thing to ask for. This isn't going to hit your mark if I haven't deposited in them first. If they don't trust me first to make a lot of those things. So you develop that trust and rapport by being an advocate and being an advisor as opposed to just an order taker like you were talking about.
Dude, that's so important. I think, and that's something where I think a lot of younger marketers are struggle with. And I'd be curious in your perspective on this point, but one of the problems that or one of the values that you bring to the table is your depth of experience, right? So you're able to have that kind of confidence coming into that conversation with the loan officer. People push back a little bit, right? But do it in a consultative way to dig deeper into what they're actually asking for, right? So for a younger marketer, then what kind of advice do you have for them where it's like, hey, you have to either learn more about what loan officers are actually going through or learn more about what you can provide for them? Like, what kind of advice do you have for those guys to how to push back a little bit more like you did?
Well, it's hard to push back if you're not used to doing it because you're kind of putting your neck out there a little bit because you got to remember when you give advice, there's always an opportunity for your advice to be wrong.
Yes.
And that can be tough. But what I would say is the risk is always worth the reward in that because it at least shows good faith to the person that you are working with that you actually care about them. So I think the perception is more important than the actual result. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for bad results here. You still need to do your part. You still need to be knowledgeable, not only in your craft, but, take these compliance courses, maybe look at some certifications. It doesn't hurt to be knowledgeable in mortgage so that you can speak the language of your clientele. I mean, in fact, every other industry, it's sort of a prerequisite, right? Like you don't go market to people that you don't know anything about. You need to maybe a day in the life of a loan officer, shadow one of them. One of the best experiences I ever had was actually shadowing a loan officer at a previous organization. As I said, I just want to follow you for a day and see what you do. Yeah. So I literally walked around with this person all day with their calls, and I just took notes, and that he was asking me questions as I went along. And I developed a great rapport with that person, and it helped me understand, a lot of times when you get the stress phone call of something else, you don't really see the context behind it. This will give you a lot of context and it'll build your relationships. So I think to answer your question, industry knowledge always helps,
Yeah.
as well as marketing expertise, developing that relationship to give you the authority to push back on people when they already have a formed opinion.
Yeah, I mean, man, there's a lot in there. I think understanding the industry, there's some easy things you can do to really kind of get up to speed, right? If you're not really sure what a mortgage is, or like my very first day on the job as a loan officer when I graduated college, didn't even know mortgage had a T in it, right? Just like, oh, it's like, what's a mortgage? Okay, yeah.
Mortgage.
But mortgage, yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of great social media accounts out there that you can follow of people that teach about mortgage industry. I think subscribing to things like the Chrisman Report would be awesome for you
Yep.
to do, where you can see everything that's going on in the industry. But I love what you said about going and actually shadowing your LOs for a day, and do it more often than not, right? Maybe once a quarter, you shadow a different LO in your company to kind of understand what's going on with them. That's huge. Also, something I've done in the past too is just attending the sales meetings and really hearing what's going on, what they're talking about. You have to understand, and this is marketing 101, but understanding your client, your customer is the most important thing. We talked about this earlier, but I want to bring it back again, right? Your customer as a loan officer or as a marketer in a mortgage company is first and foremost your LOs.
Yep.
Right. They are your customers and their customers are your customers. Right. But you have to make
Yes.
sure that you understand them as much as you possibly can. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that you need to do. And that understanding them will give you the confidence to know how to help be a strategic consultant for them. And I think,
Yeah.
last thing I'll say on that too is just like, from we said pushback, right? And I think pushback, it might be the wrong term, but offering a differing opinion, right? Or perspective is really what it is, because the last thing you want to do is push back on a law officer, because most of them don't take kind to that very well. So
Yeah.
you gotta
Don't
be
say
careful with that.
don't say no, say no, but have you considered this?
Yeah.
Like, your job's not to tell them no, your job is to help them succeed in what they're trying to accomplish. So to your point, sales meetings are such a pro move. Like, if you ask the person running the sales meeting, hey, can I join this, 99 times out of 100 they're going to tell you yes, because there's literally no downside to it. Go listen. Even though you may not understand what they're talking about, depending on your years of experience in the industry, you will learn a lot by osmosis, just by being around it. The dots will start to connect for you.
Yep.
Just go in there, listen, learn. And also, one pro tip too for managers, it's always a good idea to have kind of like an LO council. This has worked well for me in the past, where, like, if I roll out a new piece of technology, do a beta with certain influential people, or have a council of people that you ask, hey, what's working and what's not out there. Like, you may be really proud of something that you rolled out and nobody's using it, or it's not being used to its full potential. Allowing people to provide you feedback is a great way to enable you to provide feedback to them later on down the road. Again, back to ATM methodology.
That's right, dude. Well, you brought up tech, and I think we should talk about that for the last couple minutes here. I know we're running out of time, but I want to talk about this really briefly. As we're looking at the marketing shift, the market shift and continue to do so, our a marketer's conundrum is, okay, I might not be able to hire more people, but I can get more efficient using technology. What are some things that you're looking at right now that to make your team more efficient, that you're using either for your own internal team or for your LOs?
So are you meaning like methodology, or are you meaning like maybe actual vendors or tech, like tech companies?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think either one is fine, wherever you want to take it.
Okay, so I'll do both. I guess methodology. I tend to look at methodology as something like, if it involves scale or specificity, I usually lean more tech-based solution than human-based solution.
Yep.
If the problem is management, like relational or creative, I typically lean human. So to me, I've always looked at tech first, because I can ramp tech and I can scale back tech without causing like EQ damage to my team.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, one of the worst feelings ever in the world was becoming a new manager and having to lay off my first person.
Oh, it's the
It
worst.
was just the worst feeling. I would honestly just like wrecked my week. It was, and it wasn't, I wasn't laying them off because they did a bad job. I was laying them off because of circumstance. And that's honestly one of the worst feelings in the entire world, because it's, when it happens, yes, their life is massively affected, but because you carry that weight of when that happens, you're like, is there something I could have done differently? Like you do a lot of real internal soul searching during those moments. So to me, I use that as a fuel to look at ways that I can scalably offer career paths to folks. And sometimes that means offering it to less people, but it means offering it to people that I can more guarantee will be moving forward because you've done your due diligence. So examine whether or not what you need in your department kind of falls into what sort of camps. And if you need to take more risk on the human side, you'll get more specificity, but you may not get as much, I guess, scale and specificity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So kind of finding the balance of what you need relative to the solution that you're going to hire. And I guess in terms of the actual tech improvements that we've used, so some tools that I've been using to either give human beings superpowers or to do new things at lower cost or higher speed are things like Zapier. For those of you all who have it's a great way of doing connections on traditionally non-connected systems without having to be like a computer scientist. So I do have a little bit of a development background. So if you have a little bit of a development background, or you have access to somebody who is used to that, that really can give you superpowers. So you're able to do things like call APIs. You're able to write custom JSON scripts. You're able to write custom custom Python scripts, like to actually parse inside of Zapier. You can do things like email parsing. So if all these things are confusing, just hit me up. I'm happy to talk through more about it if you want. But again, think about things from how much it costs you from a sweat equity perspective to move data from one place to another and do something smart with it.
Yeah.
Zapier or Zapier, I think it's meant to sound like happier, but as a zap, no one knows how it's pronounced. That's the secret. It's that system saves me a ton of time, right? It's like another employee. Another thing that I've really put a heavy emphasis on is something I mentioned earlier, was learning to use APIs correctly and well. So JSON is a great coding language, very easy to learn. If you've ever looked at object-oriented programming languages, JSON is a great place to start, because that is the crux of how most data is sent through APIs. So you're going to hear the term API a lot going forward in the future, and it's really about moving data from one place to the next, which can trigger automation and give you better data science. Python is another language that I'm really, really heavily into right now, especially from the AI space, which I know is something you and I are really, really, really into at the moment. Python is essentially it's the language of choice for most AI models now. So doing things from a data science perspective, as well as a modeling, and using AI. So using Python to call OpenAI APIs is like that, they go together like, peanut butter and jelly. So if that's something that you're interested in, again, these aren't things you have to go to college for. These are things that you can literally type into YouTube and say, how do I learn thing in an hour? And you can get more if you just commit a night to it. You know what, just if you want to grow in your career, I remember spending a ton of time in my career just really sitting down and saying, I'm going to get better at this in a month, and I'm going to show it. I'm going to prove it. Just commit to those things, and you can learn anything you want for basically no money.
Just go on to YouTube.
Really expert. Yeah, I mean, YouTube is the university. It's public university. You can learn anything you want.
YouTube and Reddit.
Yes, pretty much YouTube and Reddit. You can pretty much anything you want. And lastly is just AI, like we talked about.
Let's talk about AI. Yeah, I want to dive more into that. So, but keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, the two main ones that I'm really using in workflow right now are OpenAI through their API. So I use ChatGPT when I have like a one-off question, but I've been using their API quite a lot in sending proprietary data to get and retrieve things. And lastly is Midjourney. I think as marketers, image modeling is going to become more impressive and more reliable over the coming months. I mean, shoot, just the iteration from V3 to V5 has been like huge. Looking like somebody's drawing in a notebook to like a photorealistic picture of something that you could prompt. So think of the impact that has on your campaigns, on your image specificity, on stock images, on things that you can use. Sky's the limit out there. Just you got to unlock your mind and not be so busy working in things that you take time to think about how you're working on things. And that's going to be a big deal moving forward.
Yeah. And I think, specifically, Midjourney is one of those things that I was literally just having this conversation with somebody else the other day where it's like, oh yeah, well, Midjourney, like this just never going to work. Have you looked at those images? It's just not a great thing. It's like, okay, yeah, but like you need to master that skill now, because this is just the beginning. It literally just came out, like, with the latest version just the other day, right? And you're talking about, where was it 6 months ago? Where's it going to be in 6 months from now? If, as a marketer, if you're not really diving deep into ChatGPT, Midjourney, Microsoft Designer, I don't know if you played around with that at all, but like, that's going to be huge as well. These platforms are getting stronger literally every single day, and they are going to change our business dramatically.
They really are. I mean, when you think about the fact that Microsoft owns a very large stake in OpenAI, as well as, Google just had Google I/O as the time of this recording a couple of weeks ago. So it's, I mean, geez, the players are setting their pieces on the board, and they're all very impressive, especially for the rate of improvement that things are happening. So the mentality of, I'm going to wait till it gets to the point to me to use it, I think you're going to be way far behind, because you're going to have to figure out syntax, you're going to figure out use case. A lot of the best things you can do now is just duct tape things together and see how they work. That way, when the platform makers get even better along, all you're doing is changing your duct tape to hammer and nails, as opposed to starting from the beginning. Yeah. I think, to your point, like Midjourney, one of my use cases for that is stock photography, right? Think about how you use stock photography today. Most times you need to use the same image for about 3 or 4 different crop sizes. So if you got a 1x1, a 1200 by 630, so like an open graph image for a blog, a banner, you can't do that very effectively for all crop sizes, usually with one image, especially if you need headroom or left and right room for text.
Yeah.
Midjourney, you can roll new iterations of the same image in multiple different aspect ratios and get pretty darn good results. Like, this is the kind of stuff that's very difficult to do. Plus, I don't know if you guys have looked at stock image repos. Probably 90% of stock images are pretty terrible and cheesy. Like, they're not good. And the ones that are cinematic, that look kind of, I think, the way that a lot of like art director style kind of want to do, they're very slim pickings, and everybody uses the same ones. Like, go to a website, I guarantee you're going to say the same. You're going to say the same 3 or 4 people over and over and over again. That's the only people that have really taken great photos that really capture an emotion. And there's just such a limited amount of them. And then, like you're talking about, think about cost, right? Cost on Midjourney to roll something hyper specific is $200-300 a year. Think about how much it costs to just do one photo shoot and hire a model and secure location and do all that stuff. Like,
you're getting custom artwork at a stupid cheap rate.
At some point, yes, $200 or $300 is expensive, but it's not expensive relative to the output of the medium long term. Like, you have to start being dollar smart and not penny stupid. This stuff is going to be very important, especially once we get a few months or a few years down the road. It's going to be borderline indistinguishable from what you would do elsewhere. Now, I'm a creative, so it kind of hurts my heart to say these things. But at the same time, I'm also a realist. I don't think that wishing that the genie was back in the bottle is going to put it back in there. I think you kind of need to embrace things to make you to give you better capacity than wish they didn't exist,
Yeah, well, and I think it just changes what your job as a creator is, right? It's not, I mean, and we were talking about this earlier, like, copywriters are not going away. They're just, I mean, it's like the rate at which they can produce copy is just going to increase, right? But you can't just take a ChatGPT blog and think it's going to be perfect. Like, I mean, a lot of people are doing that, but that's the stuff that everybody else is doing. And in order now to stand out, because everyone else is doing that, you have to go to somebody like your wife, Jarret, to have like a professionally written piece that's actually going to stand out, right? And it's the same thing on social media, right? It's like, everybody can put out hundreds and thousands of images now and post because of AI. But the stuff that stands out is that more personal branding, that loan officer actually being out there. And it's, same thing with the imagery, right? Everyone has access to Canva now. Everyone is using Canva's pro images at $12.99 a month, and you see the same people every single place, right? But the master of artwork is going, like yourself, is going to say, let me go find an alternative route. And you're now going to become a master prompt creator for Midjourney and for ChatGPT to get ahead of everybody else. And that's really what I think marketing is coming to, is really getting to the hyper specifics of what you want to create, and the way of creating it is just slightly different now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's something we talked about on a previous call, where we were all, I think I guess the best way to put this is, the obvious enhancement of AI is scale,
Yeah.
right? So you can develop a lot of volume, but the quality isn't there relative to a human making it. Now, I think that that gap will go down over time.
Mhm.
But to your point that you made on the call, that the real differentiator now isn't going to be, oh, do you blog 2 or 3 times a week, because you can do that in 10 minutes now. It's going to be, is your blog making an impact relative to the audience, and are you measuring it, and is there a disproportionate result against things that are just inherently generic?
Yeah.
You the real value in this is going to be found inside of quality, inside of this enabling quality at scale, not quantity, right? And it's also going to be found in the ability to leverage specificity or proprietary data against AI. Like, I think where we're heading really is where this is why I mentioned JSON and Python languages, is because you're going to be able to, at some point, use first party data with a small enough amount of error percentage baked in to create content that is mind-blowingly specific to people. And I really do think that augmenting that type of content to be really specific and really individual, and doing it with the quality and speed that AI provides, that's where I think this next few years is really going to be. It's going to be less about the speed and more about, man, I did this with speed and quality times 1,000 people.
Dude, 100%, 100%. We should probably end on that, because I don't think you can say any better. But I'd love to, actually, let me ask you one more question, and then we'll end on this. As a marketer today, what are you using ChatGPT and OpenAI? Like, what should everyone be using it for today if they're not?
Well, as a marketer, there's a lot of things you can use it for. Social media copy is easy mode. You can pretty much just feed whatever you want. You use it for ideation. And it can be ideation. I think people default to it for social media because it's just easy, right? But you could use it for ideation for internal comms, for give me ideas about things that we can talk about to our team internally, or content scheduling. You can use it for get your plugins set up to where you can do things like use Code Interpreter to actually do some data intelligence. So like, I got access to the Code Interpreter plugin, so I can upload CSVs of like my CRM behavior. So I can take the reports I get from Total Expert right now, load that into Code Interpreter, and tell me, user trajectories of all of our users. I can tell like all kinds of things that we talked earlier in the conversation about providing value to stakeholders at a level that they understand. This is less of, well, we need a CRM, and showing who the power CRM users may be relative to who's in your president's club, right? Like, being able to articulate that is something powerful. ChatGPT can help you out with that. I use it. So on the development side, I use it to help me write PHP and Python quite a lot. It validates my code. It will look up libraries for me. It will do a lot of things. So, I mean, GPT is like my little invisible co-pilot that sits on my side of my screen. I think the hardest thing with marketers is just remembering that it's there and changing your muscle memory from the past 15 years and realizing that this stuff is only going to get better. And it's got to be a part of your workflow. So yeah, those are the things that I use for it every day, but that list is going to keep growing.
Phenomenal, dude. I love it. Well, Jarret, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing with us your wisdom and experience. And so if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do it?
Yeah, you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there, always willing to start a conversation. So just look up Jarret Stanley, Jarrett Stanley. You will find me. I'm happy to start a conversation with you there. We've got a really great group, marketing masterminds that some of our friends, Alex Kutsishin, some folks have started. I would encourage people to really join a community. I'm a part of that community. I know you were on some of the calls before as well. This role can feel isolating because you're in a role that's a bit different from the norm inside of a sector that really isn't usually used to talking marketing with people. So it's a great group of people that you should connect with to make sure that you aren't on so much of an island. So one, I'm here to connect and talk with you. I'm happy to be a resource to anything anybody's thinking about out there. Happy to connect, but also getting in touch with people, whether that's locally or through mastermind groups online, like the one I was talking about. Don't be an island, get connected, and let's do some amazing things together in the coming years.
Boom. Awesome, Jarret. Well, hey, buddy, thanks so much for your time, and have the best day ever.
Yeah, man. You too. Thanks.
All right. See ya.